Kind of go through the agenda today, a little bit about myself, a little bit about Gale's Design, what I do. Of course, got to have a disclaimer. You always have to have disclaimers. The catalyst and how we got to where we're at today, I think is important to understand, and I think a lot of you have the same problems in your own operations. The project goals, when we started this, you always have to have some goals, and that wasn't very clear to begin with, so I want to talk about that a little bit. Implementation, the steps we went through, the challenges, and there's still challenges. I'm going to be honest, there's still challenges. Now I'm going to give you a facility tour. So the first part of this is going to be really fast, because I know you guys kind of want to take a look at the facility, and I have some nice 360 videos. And then our current status, and then what I think are the industry shortcomings. So that's kind of what we're going to cover today, so I hope that's what you expected. A little bit about myself. I've been married 43 years. My wife's sitting back in the corner there, and I'm blessed. How many of you have a full-time driver? I have a full-time driver. I go all over the country, and I never drive. You know, I spent a lot of years at CHS, and I always had a laugh. I usually got rid of my vehicles at about 90,000 miles. She drove 89,000 of them. So sometimes I had to run into the store, you know what I mean? So I've been blessed, and she still drives me around. I'm kind of an odd duck. I spent the first 13 years of my career in construction. So I understand construction from the ground up, actually out there doing the work. And then I was in the cooperative arena for 21 years, very hands-on. I mean, I was out working with the guys every day. I believed in being out there and working as a team. And then our business unit rolled into CHS, and a couple years later they asked me to run the construction division. And it was kind of interesting. I went up there and they said, Jim, we want you to run the construction division. Okay, what's the job description? We don't have one. What do you want me to do? We don't know, just go out and help people. That's a good job description. Spend money with no job description, so it was good. And then, you know, I'm an old man, so I decided last year to retire in about June. Figured I'd work on my own side business a little bit, and it's turned out to be a pretty good run. So anyway, the last 9 years I've been doing Gale's Design in conjunction with CHS, and I got into that. We all need coaching, right? There's coaches and mentors in our life. I've got a younger brother, some of you may know him, he runs ethanol plants, and he said, you know, the trouble with you, Jim, he said, you work 70 hours a week. CHS pays you for 40, but you work 70, and some of you guys who I've worked with over the years, I think you kind of know that. I've always been committed to what I do, and he said, why don't you just work 50 hours for CHS, you're still giving them 20% more than they paid for, and work 20% for yourself doing side jobs. So I started Gale's Design about 9 years ago doing side projects, and been blessed to be involved in a lot of food processing, ethanol plants, grain expansions, everything. So it's been a good rodeo. I'm blessed to have a family. We've got 2 kids that live close by, 2 in-laws, and 6 grandkids. And this is what we do on our vacations. We just got back from Rapid City, and unfortunately it looks a lot better on my screen than it looks on that screen. But anyway, we'll have to live with it. A little bit about what I do. People ask me, Jim, what do you really do? Because I don't sell anything. I don't sell equipment. I don't sell anything. What I am is a consultant. I come out and I do needs analysis. A lot of times people say, Jim, I've got this problem. So I'll go out and help them determine what the problem is. So I do a needs analysis of their facility. And this is something that I believe in wholeheartedly. Early scope budget alignment. So many times in industry, we have a Maserati appetite and we got a Yugo budget. The sooner you get those two together, the sooner you get your hands on, you know what, if you want to build that's going to cost you $16.5 million, the better off you are. So real early in the project, and I mean really, really early. I mean, I'm talking the first week or so. I try to work with people and say, if you want to do that, this is probably what it's going to cost. Everything costs more than it should. I'm just telling you that, everything. Then we go into project planning. This is where we bring the teams together. I believe that successful projects are a collaboration of a lot of people. Everybody in this room has different life experiences. Everybody has a different view on how things should be done. So I try to collaborate all those ideas into the best project plan. And then from that point, I try to break a project down. I'm not a guy who likes to hire one contractor to do everything. And the reason for it, I think in a lot of local, rural America, we've got good site contractors, we've got good electricians, we've got good concrete people. So I try to break jobs down into what I call work breakout structures, WBSs, and I try to break a project out that we can hire as many local people as we can. And then from there, go through a procurement process. Try to keep everything very clear, what this contractor is going to do, what this contractor is going to do, that type of stuff. Collaboration, get all their best ideas and come together. From there, I didn't do this when I first started CHS. All I did is a little bit of the planning and procurement, and what happened is we found out that projects go off the rail pretty quickly without a bus driver. So they convinced me I need to do construction management, so I ended up doing that for many, many years. I want to have a little bit of a disclaimer, right? This presentation's from me. I designed the Manless facility at Herman. I was responsible for working with all the engineers and everything to put it together. And the presentation from me, not from CHS. CHS does not endorse or is not endorsing this process. Yes, they have it at one of their facilities, but they're not coming out here today and endorsing it. And I'm not going to share any intellectual property. So if you think, well, you need this type of sensor to do this, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you how the system works in concept. You know, the catalyst for this whole thing was labor shortage. How many here have trouble manning their facilities? Yeah, it's every place. Every place. We can't find people to run our facilities, so that was really the driver. How can we get these multi-million-dollar facilities to work for us when we're not there? So that was really the driving force. How are we going to get more out of these facilities? Are your people getting more demanding, your customers, every day? Do they want more from you? You get, some places there's hobby farmers, some places there are mega farmers that want to work 7 days a week. I mean, you get all these different dynamics. And, you know, I'm an old man. When I started, I thought everybody worked 6 days a week. I thought everybody worked from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. I just thought that was a work week, right? Now people want to come to work at 8. They want to know they can go home at 5. They want to make sure they get the weekends off and as many 3-day weekends as possible. So how do you exceed grower expectations when your labor force has totally different expectations? And it may have changed, but when I was in the grain business, there's not a lot of money in grain. It's not like you can say, well, I'm going to just have 2 8-hour shifts. There's not enough margin to cover it, you know? So how do you exceed grower expectations and still make money? This is a buzzword every place. How do you get more out of less? We all try to do it, right? How do you run more grain through your elevators? How do you run more fertilizer through your plants? The whole 9 yards. Well, you know, the first one was really simple. Version 1 was, I still like to build this. If anybody wants to do a slip elevator and wants to build it, I'll probably come help you for nothing, right? But this was something I put together originally, and it's using a whole bunch of technology that's out there. First of all, we were going to take in, when we first received the grain, go through short bucket elevators, go through inline samplers. They've been around forever, right? You can sample, I mean, that's how you sample a rail car. They go into holding hoppers. Then while you grade the grain, you got these holding hoppers. So things are always moving around, and then when you got the proper grain, goes into bucket elevator, goes through distribution. All doable, but expensive, very expensive. And there are some things like the grain analyzer that weren't quite there yet and a few other things, but this is where we started. And shortcomings, grain analyzer wasn't perfected yet. How many have used the GSI grain analyzer? Anybody in here? It's pretty good technology. I'd advise you guys, we worked hard with GSI for probably 2 years to get it perfected. And then also going from a semi-automated sampling or grading system to a fully automated. You know, MCI's had a semi-automated one for years and years and years, and we worked very hard with Darren. He was a very good partner and got it to where it was automated. And then sample retention. What are you going to do with the sample? So we looked at these as shortcomings. Our biggest concern was cost of construction. It was only going to cost us $3 million. You don't know if we pay for $3 million. So cost of construction is a big issue. And the second thing was, okay, so if somebody's building a $30 million grain facility, they can add this onto it. What about the 4,700 grain elevators we have out there today? What are you going to do about those? So we went back to the drawing board and said, what can we do to have an automated grain facility and we can retrofit it to all these facilities we have without all the extra legs and holding hoppers and all the other stuff. So that was kind of our driving force to take the next stab at it. Because the first one wouldn't have been a problem. That had been up and running within 6 months because all that technology is available. It's just plugging it all together. going to the next step was a little more difficult. We talked about the requirements. We thought it was very, very, very critical that we could plug it into an existing facility. If you have a good facility, has remote scales and probes, has automation, we wanted to make sure that we could move it into existing facilities. We thought it was critical that we grade and weigh prior to going to the elevator. You know, the other one, you're going to dump the grain in the elevator, it's going to be in a holding hopper. So if you got a load of crap, you got to deal with it, right? So we wanted to make sure that we did the grading and weighing prior to ever the grain entering the elevator. So we wanted to utilize all the existing scale systems. I mean, I think everybody out here has remote scales. That's just, you know, that's been around for many, many years. The days of weighing on the pit are gone, right? And then work with any automated facility, so it'd be a plug and play type deal. That was kind of the requirements that we went into V2 with. So how do you have dreams to reality? You have to have clear goals. You have to know this is what we're trying to do. You have to have a team, because there's no one person that knows everything that it takes to put all these pieces together. So you got electrical experts, you got automation experts, you got mechanical experts. There's all these people, so it takes a team. And it takes time. I think I've been working on this 4 years now. It takes time, and it takes money. And you know, at the time, CHS had the vision, they said, yeah, we need to do this. So our goals were simple: limited grain types. We talked about, do we want to worry about wheat and durum and, you know, spring wheat and winter wheat and all the other stuff? And we said, no, we're going to focus on grain, the only two grains, corn and soybeans. So all the work we did at GSI, we want to make sure the grain analyzer could tell soybean from corn, because that's where this whole process starts. You have to be able to determine if it's corn or soybeans. You know, there's a lot of, you know, I think Cargill did this a number of years ago, where they have one person that sits in, I don't know where he sits, maybe sits in Minneapolis for all I know, and he can remotely operate probes across the country. You know, that's been around for a lot of years, and we talked about that, and we said, you know what, we want to try to perfect this with no human interaction. The reason for that is there's a lot of smaller companies we felt would get a lot more value out of it if they could plug it and play it in their operations and not worry about having that person set in some facility 7 hours a day, 24 hours a day. Safety. That's probably the thing that's making sure that probe doesn't damage the truck, making sure that probe doesn't hit somebody. That's been a big challenge, a lot bigger than we assumed at the beginning. Facility security. You have to build your facility for this. People are going to be running around your facility, going to be dumping grain. You can't just let them in every place. So you got to think about, okay, how do I secure my facility so not every Tom, Dick, and Harry can walk into the facility 24 hours a day. So that was a big issue. And then nobody here has ever had a farmer try to dump bad grain on you, right? Right? So that was a big issue. Commodity quality. Yeah, they're going to dump all the crap on us after hours. That was a big issue. And gaming the system. I've just heard last night that apparently somebody thinks that somebody stole a bunch of grain from this elevator. And it's like, okay, they haven't even been running it yet, so but interesting how they did that. But gaming the system is a big concern of ours. And then can it be replicated over and over and over again? That was the key. What's in and what's out? That's a big issue. We spent days on what's in and what's out, right? Because everybody wants to have everything, and you know you can't do that. So what's in the scope, what's out of the scope? You've never had 2 or 3 vendors that both want to say the same thing. We had that here. You know, does it belong in MCI? Does it belong in, you know, Agris was our scale system. Sweeney Controls was our automation. Who does what? You know, that was always a challenge as well. And then, okay, so now you got all these multiple players. Where does your scope stop and your start? And who's responsible to make sure this goes this far? All those things had to be defined. So you end up with something that looks like this. And I'm not going to go through all those blocks, but when you get all done, it's about making money. It's about making money. Don't kid yourself. Every step that's in this is about making money. The producer's not bringing grain to you because he likes to raise grain, he wants to bring it to the elevator. That's not why he's doing it. He's doing it to make money. Why does every country elevator receive grain? To make money. Why do you ship grain? To make money. Why does the landlord own land that he rents out to producers? To make money. So you got to think about all of these things that go on. And if you look through all these lines, and most of you guys, probably 3/4 of those, actually is going on in the background in your facility. So we had to think about everything, okay, from the time the producer calls up and says, hey, I want to deliver grain, to the time he's going to get his check. That's how big this is. So it's not just about the automation, it's about making sure that all the dots connect, that the producer can get paid for his grain, because that's why he's delivering grain to you, and he has to make sure they can get it. So there's a lot of work that went into process definition. I mean, we spent, I'm going to say this chart's 6 months. Calls every week, and have we thought about this, and we thought about this, we thought about this, all these different things. It was a lot of fun, I got to tell you. Probing security and gaming the system. That was another whole long, how many here work with lawyers? Nobody works with lawyers? Well, then you won't appreciate this. You know, lawyers get involved anytime you got a big company, right? So they're worried about, okay, how are we going to protect ourselves? Well, the first thing that we want to make sure everybody understood is dumping 24 hours a day is not a right, it's a privilege. So the producers have to sign these long agreements. How many here went bungee jumping? Anybody? Go bungee jumping sometimes. I mean, you got to sign your life away. If the bungee cord breaks and you get killed, they're not liable. It's just that simple. Well, this same thing with the probe by the time the lawyers got done. If anything happens at all, anything at all, it's not CHS or anybody else's fault. So we had to go through all these things with grower agreements, but the growers seem to be okay with it, you know. And the thing we were concerned about is, I'm going to say there's probably 1,000 different things that have to happen right to get that grain into the elevator and into the right bin. If one of those breaks, you can't let the guy dump. Well, we didn't want the possibility of a grower driving 20 miles to think he's going to dump grain, and all of a sudden he gets there and the system breaks down 5 minutes before he gets there, and all of a sudden he wants to give the co-op a bill for, you know, $1,000 because I drove across the country. So we had to think about all of those things and put together grower agreements. RFID tags on all the trailers. What we came up with was, and you'll get into this a little more detail when I get the 360 videos going, but each trailer that dumps in this facility has to have an RFID tag. I mean, they're all over the country. I mean, you have them in your cars, you go through, you know, express tolls and everything else, so it's not uncommon technology, but we have to know the trailer that's there. It's not about the grower, it's not about the truck, it's about the trailer. So every trailer's got an RFID tag. And that RFID tag does several things. We're still worried about people gaming the system. He probes this truck, but he weighs this truck, and he dumps this truck. Well, that sensor follows that truck all the way through the facility. There's like 12 spots or 14 spots where we know where that trailer's at, and we have it timed. We know from the probe to the scale, it should take 1.5 minutes. If it takes 2.5 minutes, we know there's a problem, and we're not going to let him go any further than that. So there's a lot of sequencing that went on. So the sensors were about not only about the trailer, but also understanding where that trailer's at in the facility and making sure that he can't do something. That was very important to us. Cameras. I think they say this in London. You can't go any place in London without being on a camera. It's that way in Herman. You can't be any place without being on camera. I mean, we've got 37 cameras every place. I mean, so we know when trucks come in to when they leave, and it's all being recorded and all this other stuff. So everybody has to understand that you're going to be recorded when you go there. Okay, so now we're going to actually get into the fun part of it. And that's the 360 videos. I'm going to kind of walk through and explain how the system works. And I wanted this to be an open session, so as I walk through this, don't be afraid to say, hey, Jim, explain that again. You know, because I want you guys to kind of get a flavor of what's going on here. I'm just walking into the facility right now, and you see a lot of stuff going on there. And I'm gonna, right there, this first one here, that's one of the sensors. So that recognizes the trailer. That right away recognizes the trailer. So if it's after hours mode and you do not have a tag on your trailer, you can't deliver. That's the first thing you have to have. You have to have a tag on the trailer. That has to recognize the tag. If it doesn't recognize the tag and you pull up the RFID system, it's going to tell you to go home. You can't do it. So it starts with this little sensor right here. That's the tag reader that reads not the customer's card, but the tag on the side of the trailer. And the next step here has been around for many years. That's just I think most of you guys use scale automation now, but this one had okay, right there. On the typical scale automation, you got the card, you scan in, it recognizes the customer, you can change his account, move on. That's been putting those in for many, many years. Well, this one here works a little different. You can't wake up in the morning and say, well, I think I'm going to deliver corn to the Herman elevator. It doesn't work that way. You have to call ahead of time. You have to say, hey, I want 10 loads of corn, because first of all, the elevator has to have the ability to dump that grain. If he's full of soybeans, you want to deliver wet corn, you just can't deliver it. So there's all these things that have to happen before the grower ever comes in. And then you give the grower a number. So right away, it's John Doe, and you're going to give him a 6 or 7 digit number. So he comes up, it's got the right trailer, he scans his card, yes, he has to have the RFID card, yes, it is recognized, and he's entering your code. Well, it says you're bringing wet corn. Well, you decide at the last minute you're going to bring soybeans and corn. It's going to stop you right there. If you don't have on what you called in for, you can't deliver. So that all happens at this kiosk. So it's a little bit more sophisticated than the ordinary scale automation, but that's kind of the heart of how this thing got started. Is people, and I don't care, I don't think Manless will ever work without the pre-call in, just like liquid fertilizer. I mean, we've been doing that for, how many here remember when getting liquid fertilizer 24 hours a day, they said it couldn't be done? I've been in the system long enough to remember those days. Oh no, farmers will come, they'll leave the hose and liquid fertilizer run all over the place. You can't let people load their own trucks with liquid fertilizer. That's just not going to happen. Well, now if you don't have 24-hour liquid fertilizer, you're not in the liquid fertilizer business, you know. I think grain in 10 years is going to be the same way. I think this is going to become a norm if we can get a few little hiccups worked out. Because if you think about the rest of dumping grain in an elevator, it's not very complicated. Automation's been doing it for years, you know. It's these pieces right here. But anyway, so grower comes in, enters his stuff, says, yep, everything is good, pull ahead. This light turns green, he pulls ahead. We're going to get up to this little top hat here in a minute. We call this a top hat. It's all about knowing where that truck's at, because you got a probe. And, you know, the truck's 3 feet this way or that way. It makes a difference on that probe. Maybe the truck is too far away from the probe. That all makes a difference on how far out it extends. So this top hat, as we call it, is a sensor, and it places that truck in the relationship of the probe. And so as the trailer goes by, it says, hey, we got a truck here, comes ahead. That's the top hat. I'm going to get into the real problem here in a minute. I'm going to stop just here for a second. You guys all see this reader board way up front here? That reader board works on the same technology as they've used in car washes for many, many years. Drive ahead 3 feet, 2 feet, 1 feet, 6 inches, stop. Or back up 3 inches because you went too far ahead. You know, it places that truck. But that's what the reader board does, and that's what that top hat does. And then it places the truck close enough that the probe then can do its work. Okay. I'm going to focus on this one right here first. This is the gamut probe that we put in originally, and the big concern is you got to make sure that you don't hit a bow strap, a tarp, side of a truck, all these different things. So we thought we'd put this, what we call a football. This end piece here is a piece that slides up and down the probe, and it's got 4 sensors in the end. So when it gets too close to a bow strap or a bow or a tarp strap or something, it doesn't let it go down there. And when it's all clear, we go down, probe the grain. We thought it worked in concept. I mean, everything works on paper, right? And that thing has been a pain for 2 years. It's broke, and what happens is it's got to be loose to go up and down there, right? Well, then grain gets stuck in between the football and the probe, and then it's stuck up in there, or it's stuck down, doesn't move, and It's just been, I mean, we have, I think that's like the 5th or 6th football. They bust, they get hit. We tried different materials and everything else, and it just come to a conclusion that it doesn't work. That's part of the problem. Then the second problem is, I'm sure you guys all know the difference between like a gamut and an intersystems probe. There's a lot of difference in the probe. They're both very, very good probes. I put a lot of both of them in. I'm not going to sit here and tell you one's better than the other. I won't do that. But the way they're built, there's more slop in a gamut probe. And some people look at that as a positive than in intersystems. So part of the problem is that probe swings out like this, right? Well, automation wants an exact XYZ coordinate. Well, how can it get an exact XYZ coordinate when you got the probe going like this? So that was a big problem. And all of a sudden, the probe would start jerking out there like this, and it's like, oh, man. So we really fought that for a long time. I mean, I'm going to talk close to a year. And, you know, GSI had heard about this and had a lot of conversation with GSI because we helped them develop the grain analyzer, which we needed earlier in the system, which I'll get into in a little bit. So GSI comes and said, we believe our probe doesn't have the slop, and we believe that we can make it work with your system. So what did we do? We put a second probe in. And our goal here was to say, okay, we're going to put a second probe. We think we can get rid of some of that slop and everything else, and hopefully we can get to where it'll hit the XYZ coordinate pretty easy. But we were all convinced that football is not a good idea. So we tried sensor after sensor after sensor, and we finally, 10 days ago, I think, about that time, we finally think we hit it. We finally got a sensor after a lot of testing that they tried it on everything. I mean, they went out there for a whole day, tried on everything they can think of, and it works. And it's a fast sensor. So our goal is the sensor does not act like the football. It doesn't go up and down. It's going to sit at the very top of the probe, and it has just a scope about that big, saying, okay, is there anything in that around the probe? And they've done a lot of testing. We think that's going to be the cat's meow. Once that gets working, because that's the last bug we really have in the system. And we've been blessed, you know, this facility will dump 450 trucks a day and not even break a sweat, you know. So it's not like they're not using the facility. They're using it every day. It's working fine, dumping a lot of trucks. I mean, he's running the train out there every 10 days. So the facility's working the way it's designed. This is just the icing on the cake. So we're thinking once we can get that sensor around on this probe, that we'll be ready to go live. That's kind of what our thoughts process is today. But anyway, so that was one of the big problems that we had. But you get past the probing, here's that little, remember I told you about the sensors? There's another sensor. It knows how long it takes to get from the kiosk up to the probe. Make sure you're not switching trailers or whatever the case may be. Then you got a gate at the end there. We want to make sure that somebody doesn't pull ahead too soon. So we got to make sure that everything's timed just right. The gate will open. Explain to them that, hey, move ahead to the scale. There's a bunch of stuff. Okay. Then we go inside the grading area. And I'm going to do inside first, and I'm going to go outside again. Okay. That's a typical collection box, right? Not quite. I'm going to get a little bit closer. Okay. First of all, when the grain comes in, it's hard to see, but there's a little camera right on the side here. That's the grain analyzer. Immediately that says it's corn and soybeans. Well, the automation system is talking. So you entered in your code, says you're delivering corn. You got the probe, it's all working, and it comes in the collection box. So right away, first of all, it says, is it corn, is it soybeans? If it's the wrong commodity, right away it's telling the grower, you got to go home. It's got to go home. It doesn't work. But let's assume that's the right commodity. I mean, producers aren't going to come in with the wrong commodity. You see that we've got 3 pipes coming off the bottom of the collection because it has to go in 3 different places. So one of them has to go to the MCI kicker. So one of these is going through, and you can kind of see it there, it goes up to the MCI kicker. This was a challenge with the MCI kicker because it was semi-automated and we made it fully automated. And the problem that we get into is there's a lot of little things in a kicker if you guys run kickers. And if a sensor's a little bit off or this or that, so we really had to go through a lot of gremlins, so to speak, to finally get to where, yes, we got the bugs worked out. Well, then what happens is, how many here hate when their computer doesn't update? Am I the only guy who hates that? Well, all of a sudden you got the MCI doing an update at a different time than you got maybe Sweeney Controls system doing an update, and guess what? They don't talk. So you got to work through those things, and we've come to realize that there's certain things you just need to do to kind of keep everything, all the software talking to each other. But back to the collection. One of them comes out of collection, goes to the MCI. The other one goes to the Dickie John over here. So you see you got all these cyclones running. What does the cyclone require to make it work? Air, fans, a lot of noise. Well, we don't want that noise inside, so we put them outside. No big problem, right? Well, it turned out to be a big problem. Anyway, you've got when it dumps from the Dickie John, dumps from the MCI, goes down below here, goes up over here to this cyclone and dumps the samples back into those two containers. And you know how it is, these projects take a life of their own, they start walking. That two-way on the end there was kind of a last minute. The manager up there is adamant, I do not want my corn samples with my soybean samples. I want good grain when I get done. So, okay, no problem. So we put a two-way on there so the system tells it if it's a grain, if it's a corn sample or soybean, dumps it in the right trash container. Then you got the lines that go along all the way around the room here and dumps into this nice little bagging system. Well, how many here have bagging systems? I don't care what kind of bag, it's designed to bag the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and that's just the way baggers work, right? Well, that's not the way this works, is because each one has to have a separate label. It has to say, this is the grower, this is the sample, this is the time, this is the everything. Just getting the Sweeney Controls to talk to the bagging company, because the bagging company really doesn't care. I sold you a bagger, it's $32,000, you deal with it. So that was a whole nother 6-8 weeks. But we got that bugs worked out. But anyway, so right now what we do in the samples is everybody that delivers in its sample has got a label on it. And the next morning they look through all the bags to make sure the bags are representative of the sample. If you got one that maybe doesn't look right, you can cut it open, smell it. We tell the grower, if you don't tell us in 48 hours, if you don't like the sample, we're going to dump the sample in the pit. So they have a time limit. It's not like we keep these samples very long. But it puts up a nice little sample, and it has a little conveyor on the end here. I wonder if I back up a little bit here. Yeah, you can see it, the conveyor that comes out. Then you can sit out there. Here you got all the controls. You can run the whole facility from here if you want. No big deal. That's the way most elevators sit up anymore. There's another view of the a little bit closer to the right there's that grain analyzer right there. That's that little beauty. And that was a big thing. We met with GSI and they says, we can't get it perfected. Why not? Well, we just can't get it to recognize because you know how they program this stuff. They run thousands upon thousands upon thousands of photos across this and build an algorithm that says, okay, that's what this is, corn or soybeans. And we asked them what the problem was, and they couldn't get good pictures. So we went out to 3 or 4 of our elevators, put these grain analyzers on 3 or 4 of our elevators, tied our information into their information, so pretty soon they had all the data. And that really was a big help. We got that all, so it all works well. If you guys ever have need for these are good technology. It really is. They're pretty robust. We haven't had one misread yet, so it's really been good. Okay, there's probably a little bit better view of the bagger. And of course, you got the little compressor over here. So we got all these fans and all this air, right? All the fans are outside. Herman, Minnesota is cold in the wintertime. So now you got all this warm, moist air on the inside going outside. Guess what happens? That was another thing, the problem. Freeze up in the wintertime, which we'll talk about in a second. But anyway, that's the control room. If we had to do it all over again, I'd segregate. I'd put the grain grading in a separate room, have the control room kind of independent. There really isn't a need. There's where it dumps into these 2 units dump into here, takes it over, puts it in the sample trash cans. There's all Darren stuff from MCI. There's the Sweeney Controls. That's the brains of the system inside here. Sweeney Controls, I don't know how many use Sweeney for automation. They're like a lot of other companies, they're a good automation company. There's a sample of the bag. It has the labels on it. I use the same technology that these 360 videos. I film a lot of locations. That's how I start most of my analysis for. Okay. So here's the green line going in the building. No big deal, right? Except when it gets 20 below zero and you got all that warm air going outside hitting those fans, and pretty soon it's freezing up. So this just money. Remember what I said about it just takes time and money? Here's the 4 fans that are out there. So there's 4 fans up here, then you got your 2 vacuum pumps down here. So that was a whole nother issue. Well, how's the probe testing going today? Jim, everything's froze up. We worked 2 hours getting everything thawed out. Good idea to put them outside for noise, but not a good idea when you start thinking about the change in temperature. So now what we're doing is we're actually adding a nice little room onto the office here where all that stuff's going to be inside. So it's still going to be inside. It's going to be heated to 40 degrees so it doesn't freeze. And it's still going to be separate so it's quiet. So that part is coming along pretty good. Any questions so far? Is there anything more you guys like to see and actually walk through the facility? Inbound scale, you know, that again, if you look, there's the reader. We know how long it takes to get from the probe to the scale. There's the sensor right there. And another big battle we had as we went through this process is automation company wanted to wait till the grain was completely graded before we left the probe. Well, that takes 1 minute and 30 seconds, which means you got everybody waiting up 1 minute 30 seconds. Well, that doesn't work. You have a facility that can dump a truck, 75 trucks an hour. 1 minute and 30 seconds doesn't work. So that was another thing. So we had to go through and we had to make sure that they understood that we had to get the timing down. That's why it's a 2-sided probe. And we've got it down to where we think we can get to, I don't think we'll make it to 75. I think we've got it down to like 1 minute and 2 seconds for the process so we can go one to the other. So I think we could get to about 55 trucks an hour. And if we get to there, by that time we'll figure out how to get to the next step. But the key was to get the truck away from the probe up to the scale. That sounds simple, right? You got 2 complete automation companies. You got the scale automation is Agris. You got the probe automation is Sweeney, and the 2, I don't know, I'm not a IT guy, but we work weeks on calls to try to get those 2 systems that we can get that information, because that reader board is not connected to the same network as the one by the probe. The one by the probe is Sweeney's, the one here is Agris. You'd think it'd be simple, just connecting wires, right? Well, we finally got it working, but it was just another one of those challenges. So the scale, you guys have all used scales like this before. Then you start going into the facility here. It's three bays, 25,000 bushel each. Most of the time, the way we're going to run it after hours is 1 pit's wet corn, 1 pit's dry corn, 1 pit's soybeans. So you don't have to change. You can. The distribution up on top is a triple inlet distributor, so every leg can go to every bin, but you know how it is when you do clean out and stuff. Get up here a little bit further. As you can see, again, we've got those sensors on every one. So we know from the time that he left the scale exactly how long it takes to get over here. And then he drives up, and we have reader boards above each one of the bays. We're telling him at the scale what pit to go to, pit 1, pit 2, pit 3. All growers follow instructions, right? Every time they go to the right place. So again, we had to make sure that we had to dummy-proof this thing. So he gets in the wrong lane, what do we do? Well, first we talked about, by golly, make him back out and get in the right lane. Right? Some of these guys have a hard time going ahead. Now having to back up a semi when potentially there's somebody behind him we didn't want to do that. So the automation set up that it'll tell him please hold, you're in the wrong pit, but we'll clear path. So it'll clear the path and switch pit 3 if it was soybeans to whatever he's got on his truck. So we wanted to make sure that we can handle all these things, but we had spreadsheets of all the possible things that can go wrong. I mean, that's part of the process here when you figure this stuff out is what can go wrong? And how do I dummy-proof a system that when it goes wrong, the system can fix it without human intervention? So that was one of the things that, just an example, one of the many that we went through that says, hey, we got to be able to do this. And our distribution can handle it. It's just time. It takes about, I think, 1.5 minutes. Does that sound right? To clean out path, time you get from the pit all the way through the leg. And it'll switch around and do all that stuff on its own. And the gates are up here right now, but the gates are down when the system's in operation. This is another afterthought, okay? There's going to be a period of time where 60% of your trucks maybe have the sensors on, and the other 40% are just guys who don't care about 24 hours. I farm 40 acres, and I'll bring it in 8 to 5. I don't care about it. Okay, so now you got the system, so it's working. What do you do over here? Well, you got the gates and everything work. Oh, you're walking through the facility here. Sorry about that. We had to have the system so people could get in otherwise. So if you have the 40% who don't have the RFID tags and it's during the 8-hour day, they can scan their car over here. It says, yes, you're at the right pit, opens the gate, he goes in, dumps the grain. So that was just another one of those afterthoughts that we come through the process. But went through the gates, and you're going to see sensors again on the door, so we know when the truck comes in. Everything is timed, everything's on cameras all the way through. Am I doing okay on time, Jess?
Yeah, we're doing fine. We have plenty of time.
Pits just keep getting bigger. I remember the first pit I did was 6 by 20 was a big pit, and then 8 by 24. Now they're 10 by 28, and we're just doing one right now. They're 12 by 35. The pits just keep getting bigger. So, but anyway, these are big 1,000-bushel pits. The high doors on one end for end dumps, but you can see the sensors by the doors again. There's cameras underneath. You can see underneath the trucks. Now the producer's dumped his grain. He's ready to go home. I'm done. Outbound scales is typical. We've been doing those for years. But again, there's the sensors on there. You got to make sure that. What's that? Do we have people at the pits? No.
Gee, if I was a farmer, I think I'd want to dump at your facility.
Why is that?
What I'm trying to say is, if I was a farmer dumping that facility, I mean, I'm sure every elevator here is those farmers, hey, let's hide stuff at the bottom of this truck, slug the load, as we call it.
Absolutely.
And it goes into your 750,000 bushel bin, and you obviously didn't know that. So then what happens?
Yes, you're 100% right. I'll back up one step. I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you. What we did on the bottom of these, okay. You guys all know how pits are generated. On the bottom of each one of these, you put you guys ever use those sensors that go, the probes that go into the grain? So the first grain that comes out of the truck is going to hit the bottom of the deal. Well, there's a sampler right there. Goes in, takes a sample. And again, this is a privilege, it's not a right. Somebody slugs a truck once, they're kicked out. It's right on the documents they signed. But yeah, that was one of the big things that Jerry was concerned about. He said, what happens if people try to slug the truck? And that's just another one of the sensors that you put in there. But very good question, I missed that. That's part of the technology. I usually have my notes here and stuff, but yes, that's a good way to.
Okay, now looking at our picture here, we all know this. We can't dock for soybean hulls. Soybean hulls do not like to fall through the 2-inch gates always. And you see some sitting there.
Absolutely.
What happens at night when that builds up? Is there a camera that says there's too much soybean hulls here? Stuff won't fall through, or
We don't have we don't have that yet, no.
You don't have that. Do you have cameras? You do probably have cameras up in the dump areas there?
Well, there's 6 or 8 of them in that area.
Yeah.
To your point, one thing we all recognized as we went into this is we're going to learn as we go. And we took the attitude that there wasn't a problem that would come up that we couldn't solve. Now, did we know it was going to take 2 years to automate a probe? No, I'm going to stand here and tell you no. Sweeney, and I can get that probe to work. I can get it to work. Well, he found out that he's been on it for 2 years too, and he hasn't raised his price, hasn't done anything. I mean, it's been just a labor of love. But we went into this with the understanding that we are going to run across things we don't know today. That would be another one. Yes?
When problems arise, like say somebody pulls the wrong pit, blocks up everything, timing isn't correct, and the system shuts down, who do they call to reset the system or get things fired back up again?
As soon as anything happens, anything at all in the whole system, from the probe to a truck coming in, anything that goes wrong, there's whoever's on call for 24 hours. The system's set up already that they get text immediately. It says, hey, we got a problem. But to your point, and it's a good point, I tried to explain as we went through this how we kept learning, we kept adding, kept learning, kept adding. We understood that was part of the process. If this was easy, you guys would all have it already, right? You'd all have it already. So we went into this with, hey, we're going to solve the problems as they arise.
That probe that you said that was in the pit, does it just go once, or is it the whole time the truck's dumping?
No, just the beginning. We didn't put them in this yet. That's another. We've got the design, we've got the money and everything else, but we haven't put them in yet. But that was one of the things that we looked at is we're still worried about the slugging part. But very good question.
So you say you haven't put that in yet?
Correct.
Okay. And when you do put it in, I'm assuming there will be the same bagging system as what you have in the probe house.
Let me make a recommendation. I don't have that photo on here. If I would lay a new facility out, one of the things that we would do different on this is, and we talked about it extensively, and at the time he wanted that probe grading up by the office. He just thought that was critical. And he had enough footprint to do it elsewhere, but that's where he wanted it. If we ever do this again, we try to get all that equipment down by the elevator. And we could have done it real easy here. I mean, it would have been simple to do. Now you're using the same bagger, same everything, all the same systems.
Follow-up, I should say. So then he's supposed to be bringing in dry corn, which he assumed was dry. And if you go with your second method of the probing there, the grain is already in the drag, already being conveyed to the bin. Let's say he drops it in at 22% because whoops, or whatever the case is. It's already too late in that case.
No, there's gates in those pits.
So it would stop the conveying equipment?
It could, yes. We talked through all that. That would be easy to do.
Okay.
Because the sampling, once you get the probe, it's like, I think the moisture's like, what is it? You guys all use Dickie Johns every day. How fast can you get a sample through a Dickie John? That's how long you're gonna wait. What's that? That's pretty fast. Yep. What you're gonna find, guys, is if people know they game the system, they're gonna get kicked out. They're not. You know what I mean? And how many of you guys know your customers that would do it? How many? You simply don't allow them. I mean, this is not a right, it's a privilege. And you have to understand that with that comes some risk. Just like on liquid fertilizer, it's the same thing. You're not going to give liquid fertilizer to everybody. You're not going to let the small hometown guy who wants to put a little liquid fertilizer in his garden come and get liquid fertilizer in the middle of the night. It's not going to work that way. It's the same thing. You got to put some practicalities in some of this. I know as we went through this, and I have the honor of working with a lot of really good managers at CHS, and some of them give 100 reasons why this wouldn't work. And there's a few of them that says, we have to figure it out. We have to figure it out. And that's kind of the approach that Jerry wanted to do. He says, we got to figure this out. We've got to get to where we can do this. I do believe from the bottom of my heart, this will become a norm. They'll figure out the bugs. But all good questions. As I was saying, the outbound scale, it's a typical outbound scale. There's nothing there. You go through, get your ticket, and you leave, right? We didn't have to do anything special here. Okay. We've run in a controlled environment with the football. I mean, we can get that to work, but every 4 or 5 trucks that football gets stuck. Well, you're not going to run 24 hours a day and you know that's going to happen. Our sensors, we believe right now the sensors are probably 8 weeks out from getting the sensors, and they're expensive. The sensors alone, $13,000. But we get the sensors on. Sweeney's pretty convinced within a month afterwards he'll have the thing up and running. So that's kind of where we're at right now on the sensors, and so we plan to be in operational soon. And Jerry's been very patient. Part of the reason he's patient is he's hitting home runs. I mean, he's had good crops up in the area. You're loading trucks every 10 days, loading a unit train every 10 days. I mean, you're getting 400 trucks a day through it. The facility's working. It's a beautiful facility. It really is. So the facility's working, and this is just the icing on the cake. Industry shortcomings, application, optics, and sensors. How many here run John Deere sprayers? Have you guys talked to John Deere lately? I mean, they're if you think about it, they're working out right now with like 120-foot booms, whatever, that to where they're going to have all the nozzles know when it's going to spray, and it's going to spray just the weeds. Think about that once. And you know why they can do that? Because there's millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of acres that do it, and they look at a big profit opportunity. The trouble with grain elevators, there's only 4,700 of them. And how many new ones get built every year? Man, if there's 100 new grain facilities a year, I would say that's probably a stretch, right? Maybe not that many, maybe 50. And then you take the 4,700 and say maybe 5% will upgrade to this technology. There's not enough business there that people want to spend any money. I don't think there's anything that couldn't be solved with the right amount of money. And I've talked to Jess and Mark. I said, you guys need to go and get some grant money from the U.S. government. I mean, they let you study the mating habits of a cockroach. Why don't they let us figure something like this out that had real value? But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take somebody to fund this thing. There isn't anything in this whole process that's hard, that's difficult, couldn't be funded. It just needs money. And right now, there's not enough money in how many you could sell a year to stick any resource into it. So, but that's part of the problem. The grain analyzers, GSI will tell you long term, they'd like to see that get a lot further to where you can actually know durum and spring wheat and winter wheat and everything else. I mean, that's one of the things that'd be nice. You know what I mean? And it'll get there. It'll get there. There's sensors out there right now that are phenomenal what they can tell, but again, the market's there for that certain type of sensor. So I think if they get the grain analyzer working, precision probe, I kicked this around with the GSI until I'm blue in the face. Everybody wants to use a probe design that's been around for 50 years. I mean, when did the GSI and gamut probe come out? They had to be back in the 60s and 70s, right? Isn't that 40, 45 years ago? It's the same thing. They want to use the same technology, and look at a palletizer. Look how fast you can stack bags and all the other stuff. To me, that's kind of what a probe should look like. More of a precision probe and everything else. Hopefully with optics and a little bit of money we can get there, but I think this is industry shortcoming. So, questions? Go ahead.
What's the need for having 24 hours a day? Because, obviously, at a normal facility, you've got to load it at the other end, and then they got to drive. I mean, obviously, in harvest, those 2 months, but other than that, are there a lot of guys that want to come dump a load of grain in the middle of the night, or?
We call it 24 hours, but our goal was about the employee. If you have an employee that knows it's going to be 8 to 5, and how many of your producers stop harvest at 5? They don't. So it wasn't, we'd like to call it 24 hours, but Jerry's really focus was try to get from that 5 till 10 o'clock at night, and then on weekends, because you had a lot, in that area there's some hobby farmers. And how many guys have at those time of year where you got 10 trucks a day? So now you got to have somebody's elevator for 10 trucks a day. See, 10,000 bushels a day at 25 cents a bushel, and you're paying a man. I don't think that works. So again, if you can reduce your manpower by 33% over the course of a year, expand your hours, and give yourself flexibility. What he's really looking at too is, I'm sure a lot of you guys use grain piles, right? You pick up a lot of, again, how many of you properly probe all the stuff that's coming in off your own pile? Some of you do, some of you don't. But the point is, if you had an automated process where it just happens, now all of a sudden you're picking up the whole grain pile and you've got no labor in the elevator, no labor probing trucks, no labor doing anything. It's all there. And you can record every bushel that went from the ground pile to the elevator, know what grade it came in, the sample and everything else. So it's not really, we call it 24 hours because once you get it working, those hours it's going to work the rest of the time.
How does the grader grade for like damage?
How does what?
How does it grade for like damaged corn?
How does it grade?
Damaged corn? Like how would it identify the damaged corn?
Well, you got your MCI kicker. So it's got the same screens in an MCI kicker, so it's gonna know broken, cracked.
Yeah, but like heat damage. And like
It's not going to pick that up. So if you got corn that's coming out, somebody burnt their corn, or you have the spoiled corn coming out, it's not going to pick that up. That's why you sample it. You look at the bags the next day, say, hey, is there a problem with this bag? And how many of you guys dump that stuff every day in your elevator? That's the part that Jerry and I had many conversations on. We make this big deal out of this farm that delivered that one load of corn that's got some heat damage. And we know damn well what we do if you deliver it during the day. You dump it in the same damn bin, you blend it off to the next train, right? Isn't that what we do in the green? Huh?
But we charge that farmer less.
I understand.
Well, great. Any other questions here for Jim? All right, one more here in the back.
Hey, Jim, as you were building this, with your sensors, your cameras, I mean, how much of that stuff was like? And then from the training perspective, the maintenance guy, how much of that was, how much training, I mean, that maintenance guy had to know everything about this plant, for every sensor, for every camera, because I'm sure everything's plug and play, right? So if one sensor goes bad, he can swap something out, put it back in, but from a network perspective, from an IPT perspective, I mean, how many people were on site every day, every night, being able to change out if there was an error, or from that perspective, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the elevator itself, once you get to the heart of the elevator, there really is no additional, I mean, it's got the standard rub blocks, bearing temperatures, all that stuff in. So the elevator itself is the same all the way through. Most of the sensors are in the probing area. That's really the area. And that's probably going to be something that would take some training. We got to get the thing working first. But yeah, it's another challenge.
Thanks, Jim, for going through this. I mean, it's pretty cool stuff. And you answered part of my question earlier about kind of the desire of the farmer to want to deliver 24 hours. But I'm curious, what kind of feedback have you gotten from the customers? Is it easy to use? Is it difficult? Are they getting in the wrong lane? Are they
Well, we're not live
concerned with the sampling? Oh, it's not live.
Yeah, we're not live yet. Jerry's committed that we're not going live until it's 100%. Because you get stuff, and we've kept it real quiet in the area because we don't want growers to have this big expectations. So he's got his board of directors that are 6 or 8 people, and they're the ones that are going to take the next step. The thing that's interesting is he had some calls, because the word is out in that area, he had some calls, and the guy says, what do I need to set up count up? He says, who are you? Well, I live over here. Well, you never deliver to me. Yes, but I tell you what, my elevator, I do everything at nights and weekends. And he said, I need somewhere where I can dump my grain. So he's found that there's growers that are excited about it and are going to use it. But most of this is about labor savings. I mean, it's not just about the 24 hours, it's about every day, all day. How many guys run elevators that there's times a year where it's just nothing goes on with the elevator? But you got to have somebody there because you got some people delivering grain. We're just trying to improve that situation.
Great. You have one more?
Maybe kind of big scope question. Why not concentrate more on automating rail car loading and saving labor there versus, like, say, providing 24-hour dumping? Why not spend the resources to automate
Main reason, what touches the customer? Railcar doesn't touch the customer, he doesn't care. He just doesn't care. And I think that has to get there. I think the whole process needs a lot of work. The biggest problem in the industry is just not enough money in any single sector to make it happen. No, I agree with you, but the reason we took this first was customer. It's how can we make the experience better for the customer?
Great. All right. Thanks, Jim. You know, this is great. You're the final speaker, and you had the most questions. I think if we added all the questions together from all the other speakers, I think that, you know, I think you exceeded that. So thank you very much. So please join me in thanking all of our speakers for their presentations during CONVEY'23 here today. That was a great show. Just want to let you know, the previous speaker, Steve Fry, he left all of his contact information right here, so I'll just leave it here on the table if you want to take his card or anything else, if you didn't already get that. So we've come to the end of Convey.
I'll get out of your way, Jess. How about that?
So we've come to the end of CONVEY'23 conference presented by NGFA, Jeeps, and Jeeps Media Group. We appreciate your attendance and participation. Once again, we'd like to thank all of our exhibitors and generous sponsors for helping to make these events possible. Our partner sponsor has been CCS Group, JD High School, and then our supporting sponsors are JD High School and Company, McPherson Concrete Storage Systems Incorporated, Safety Made Simple, Schooler Company, Westside Salvage, and our contributing sponsors are CoBank, Sukup Manufacturing, Trinity Rail, and United Grain Corporation. Let's thank our sponsors for everything that they've done to make this event possible. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This great turnout, seeing a lot of new faces, a lot of familiar faces, great opportunity to network. So really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their schedules to be here. The speaker PowerPoint presentations and videos of the presentations will be available as soon as possible at www.convey23.com. So more than likely, probably first thing next week. There's also going to be a survey that we're going to be sending out too. So we'd appreciate your participation in that survey as well. As far I know, there's also I want to remind everyone, there's also going to be NGFA is going to be there's going to be a Harvest Safety Week. It's going to be held August 21st through 25th. I know there's dates for the Jeeps Exchange coming up, but we don't have it on the screen here. So unfortunately, I know they have a lot of dates. I don't know, Glenn, Julie, any particular dates you want to mention? February 24th through 27th in Kansas City. That'll be the next Jeeps Exchange coming up. Thank you. And then, as I said, more information on the Harvest Safety Week. That can be on the NGFA webpage, and also with Jeeps as far as the exchange, it's on the Jeeps webpage. Also, don't forget about NGFA's 52nd Annual Country Elevator Conference. Will be held December 3rd through the 5th in Louisville, Kentucky. And as I mentioned, we'd appreciate if you could fill out the survey. Next year, we're still working here with the hotel on finalizing our contract. We don't have the exact date yet, but it is going to be in July of 24 here at the Hilton in Omaha for next year. So we'll be getting all that information out soon. So once again, we thank you for attending this great event, and we hope you all have safe travels home.